Hey there, guys. Dubs Rider here, and we are finally doing the motorcycle oil change video here for the Honda CTX1300. One of the most simple things you can do to prolong the life of your bike is to make sure that you do regular oil changes. And what I've found is that I think the Honda interval is right around 8,000 miles. I want to say they suggest doing oil changes. I tend to do mine every year, regardless of whether or not I've gotten that 8,000 mile mark, um, or every about 3,000 to 3,500. It's fairly inexpensive, and I found that it definitely will prolong the life of your motor if you make sure that you change the oil on a regular and consistent basis. So we are going to start with talking about some of the tools that we're going to need and some of the products that I use at least to change mine. And then we're going to jump into it, and I'll take you through some of the little quirks that I found with this bike. Changing the oil with the center stand on, you would think would be a much easier process than it is, but I don't think the engineers are really thinking this one through when they designed the center stand. So we'll kind of jump into that, and I'll kind of help you try to avoid any pitfalls or having a messy oil change. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into it. All right. So we're going to talk about the tools that you need to get this job done. A few tools here. We've got them all laid out here on the table. You're going to start with the Rotella T6. I use this oil over the Honda oil because I've found that it's much cheaper than the Honda oil, and everybody that I've talked to and everybody that or all the forums that I've read said that it works just as well. And so you can save a couple bucks on your oil change by using the Rotella T6. Just make sure it's the kind in the blue bottle, which is got the special connotation for, I believe it's JAMA, but it's designed for wet clutches. There is a Rotella T6 in a white bottle that is not designed for wet clutches, so just make sure that you're buying the right oil there. Next, I've got the K&N oil filter. Last time I did the oil change, I didn't switch over to the K&N, and I kind of wish that I had, just because the socket there on the end makes it much easier to get in and change the oil filter out. You'll see kind of later on, it's going to be a little bit more difficult with the center stand on there to change the oil filter out. And so I still need, for at least this time, I still need the oil wrench cap there. The part number is KN-204. That's the one that I use in my bike for the Honda CTX1300. I've got a 17 millimeter socket there, along with a 1/2 inch driver. That's going to allow us to take the bolt out of the bottom of the oil pan to drop the oil out of the motorcycle. And lastly, I've got some Reynolds wrap there. We're going to take a few pieces of that. Anybody that's changed oil in this bike knows that the oil filter tends to drop a lot of oil on your pipes, and frankly, it's just messy, and I don't like to have a mess everywhere. So I'm going to show you a trick a little bit later on with swapping that out and putting that aluminum foil underneath there and getting that oil to drain out more cleanly. So pretty simple, quick, just a few tools here and some product, and we'll get the oil change going here. So we're going to start with the fun part. Whenever you're doing an oil change, you always want to make sure that your bike is nice and warm. It's up to operating temperature. A lot of guys will go around and they will, ride their bike for a while just to get it up to operating temperature. You can let it sit and idle until it gets up to operating temperature. Just whatever you do, make sure that the oil is nice and hot when you get ready to change the oil on the bike, so that you get the most amount of oil out of the bike. It's really from a draining standpoint that having the oil hot in the motorcycle helps you out. So we're going to go ahead and do that, get the bike up to operating temp, and have some fun with it. Take it for a short little jaunt, take it around town. get it nice and warmed up, and then we'll come back in and I'll show you the steps to dropping the oil out of it. All right, so I know this may sound really simple, but I want to just take a few minutes here. We've let the bike warm up. I let it idle for probably 10 minutes or so, just to get it up to operating temperature. And the gauge that I use is right here, the second level. You'll see right on the bottom is your fuel gauge. Right above that, you'll see the hot and cold temperature there. It should run about halfway. It should be about even. And that's how you know that the bike is up to operating temp. And depending on how cold or hot it is outside, it might take you a few minutes longer or shorter. But for mine, it was 5 to 10 minutes and the bike was up to operating temperature. And now we're ready to get ready to do the oil change. All right, so as you can see there, our drain bolt's right here. And that's what we want to make sure we at least break loose. Now, I don't have the drip pan underneath here just yet, but that's because I always like to get this bolt loose first. And be careful here because the pipes are hot. I like to get the bolt ready to come out. As you can see, it's kind of loose right here, but not loose enough that the oil's coming out. And then I get my catch pan ready and my gloves, because everything is warm, and then we'll drop the bolt and let the oil run out. Alright, so as you can see, I've got my oil pan in position here, my catch pan, my drain pan. Just something simple. It's got a nice screw on the end so that I can pour it into my jug when I'm done. Got my bolt loosened there, and I've got regular gloves on as opposed to my latex gloves that I normally wear, because when the oil comes out of here it's pretty warm. And so I just have a standard set of gloves that I use for changing oil, and it makes it nice and simple. So I'm just going to get in here. The camera's kind of in the way. And just let the bolt fall there. And I've got that catch pan on there. So you can let the bolt fall right into place, and as you can see there, it's draining out the oil. And I'm going to let this sit for probably maybe 10-15 minutes, and I'll bring you guys back in when it's about ready to switch to the oil filter. Alright, so wanted to bring you back in. As you can see there, it's just kind of a dribble, but I oftentimes will let it sit like this for at least another 10 minutes or so, just to make sure that all the drops come out. And then as you can see, there's just a really small stream coming out of there. But I'll let it sit there, and I'll let it drip and continue to drip for quite a while longer in order to make sure that I get as much oil out of there as possible. So just a quick hint there, once you see a drip like that, you'll see it start dripping intermittently. Let it sit for a little while longer and get the rest of the oil out. Alright, so it's been about probably 10-15 minutes, and I've just letting it drip there, and as you can see, it's dripping at a really slow pace. So what I like to do at this point, normally your bolts kind of cool down a little bit. This is a perfect time to kind of change out this washer and kind of get it in focus there. There's a crush washer that goes on the top of this bolt, and what I like to do is pull this off, clean it up a little bit, replace that crush washer, get a little bit of the oil back on there, and then we're going to go in and just simply put this bolt back in for now. And this is going into aluminum block, so you want to make sure that you're nice and careful with it. Don't force it. If it doesn't go in there even, you should be able to spin it nice and easy like that. What I'll do is just spin it until it kind of stops, gives me a little bit of force back. And we'll button this up kind of towards the end, but I want to make sure I kind of stop the flow of oil. Take a little bit of paper towel and clean it off, and now we're ready for the oil filter. Alright guys, so as you can see here, the center stand causes some issues with taking out the oil filter, so you got to get a little bit more creative here. What it is was, as you can see this here, I just butted it back up against the center stand here. And then what I'll do is, I'll take my my oil filter wrench, and I've got it right here. And I've got just a swivel end on it. I don't know if you can see that, but just kind of a swivel end. And then what I'll do, and this is the back of the center stand right here, where my hand is hitting. So what I'll do is, I'll bring this oil filter in from behind the center stand and get it on the oil filter. Then you'll see my fingers in there. And I apologize, it's not a very good angle. There's not a whole lot of clearance here to get the camera in. But basically then what I'll do is get my Alright, so as you can see there, kind of letting got the foil in place over the pipe there, kind of funneled down into the drip pan. Got my wrench in there, and I'm just kind of backing it out real slowly, giving it time to kind of continue to drain oil. Looks like it's pretty good there. Take my wrench out of there. I should be able to finish the rest here by hand with it. Alright, so once you've let that drain a little while, you'll take the new oil filter here, and I just poured a little bit of oil in it from the new gallon, or new 4-quart gallon I've got there, and put a little around the ring. Then what I'll do is work it back in here, get it back in position here. And then this creates a natural vacuum, so you don't need to over tighten this. I normally just tighten it as hard as I can with my hands here, and I call it good. The oil filter's back in. So next we'll finish putting the drain plug back in, and we'll get going on the rest of the oil change here. Alright, so we've got the oil filter back in. I just took a few minutes, tightened back up the bolt in the drain pan there. One side note with that is make sure that the drain bolt is not tightened too tight. You are going into an aluminum block there, so you don't want to over tighten it. So just take your time with it, tighten it, and then tighten it tight, and then about a quarter turn past that, and then you're good to go. Now we're going to get going with filling the oil back into the bike here, and yeah, we're almost done here. All right, so I'm going to finish taking this off here. Make sure you set this someplace clean so that it's out of the way. And this bike takes 4 quarts of oil, so we're pretty much just going to take this jug here and we're going to fill the bike. And I normally just take my time with this process here and try to make it as clean as possible. Now, 4 quarts is when the bike is completely empty. So what you want to do is fill it until you get to about 3.5 quarts. We're almost there. And then we start checking the oil fill level line and filling as needed. So give me just a second here. I'll reposition the camera and we'll get you a shot of that. All right, so just to give you guys a quick snapshot here of what the oil window looks like. You'll see right here, actually I can't get in there, but right, let me see if I can get my finger there. There's a line, and there's 2 lines on that side of the window. As you can see, the linkage there kind of goes right parallel with that line. So what I always try to do is make sure that I'm at least in the middle or towards the top of that second line there, and that's kind of your zone. You don't want it to be lower than the line that you can see there, and you don't want it to be higher than the line that that's right behind the linkage there. Now, my bike took almost exactly the whole bottle, so that'll kind of give you a gauge of how much oil is actually in the bike. Alright, so now that we're done filling the oil there, we are just going to take this out, and let me first grab some paper towel here just to not get oil everywhere. I kind of just keep the paper towel in there around the end of it. We're going to put back in our drain plug here. We're going to line this up. And you'll see it kind of fits in some patterns here. And then there's 2 knobs right back here. It goes on. And you'll feel it kind of click in place there. And yeah, that's an oil change on the Honda CTX1300. So now that I'm filming today, it probably took me about a half hour, 45 minutes, and that's repositioning the camera and really playing more so with the lights. The longest part of the oil change is just waiting on the oil to drain. Once that's done, honestly, this is something you guys could do in 10-15 minutes. Not real difficult at all. Not real messy. Just make sure you dispose of your oil and your oil filter accordingly to what the regulations are in your area. And yeah, that's a wrap. We're ready to ride.